The palace of Queen Leora stood tall above the silver hills and the shining rivers. Every morning its towers glittered in the soft light of dawn, looking as if the whole world had been built of calm and peace. Queen Leora ruled her land with a fair hand and a kind heart. Her people loved her because she listened, watched, and never made promises she could not keep. Her kingdom was a place of beauty, but beauty in this world came with danger. The nobles of the Silver Court often smiled too politely, their words soft but their aims sharp as knives. Leora learned long ago that a crown did not make one safe. Yet through all her years on the throne, she had one person she trusted completely, her chosen guard, Ethan Maris. Ethan was not born into power. He had no family name that history would remember. The first time Leora met him, he was a soldier standing in the rain, calm and silent while others sought shelter. His armor was dented, his hands rough, his eyes tired, yet his gaze was steady. When she asked for his name, he bowed simply and said, "Ethan, my queen," nothing more. That moment, something about him caught her attention. From that day, he became her closest guard. He did not speak much, but his words always carried weight when he did. He seemed to know what she needed before she said it. If she grew weary of endless court meetings, he appeared with gentle words or silence that rested her mind more than sleep. If danger rose, he stood between it and her with quiet resolve. For 5 years, Ethan stayed by her side through peace and conflict alike. Many in the court whispered about him. Some said he must be a spy, hiding a secret past. Others believed he was a lucky man who pleased the queen with charm alone. But Leora knew better. Ethan had no taste for politics or games of power. He cared only for his duty, protecting her, always watching, always present. Yet even she, who thought she knew him best, could not deny that there was something strange about Ethan. He moved with a calm that seemed too deep for a simple soldier. When storms shook the palace, he never flinched. When fire struck the walls of enemy towns, he looked into the flames as though remembering something older than fear. Sometimes Leora would catch his reflection in the gold mirror near her throne and feel a strange pull toward something hidden beneath his quiet eyes. One evening, after a long session of council, she called him to her private garden. The stars were bright, and the sound of the fountains filled the air. She turned toward him and said softly, "Ethan, do you ever think of leaving this place? To have your own life, instead of guarding mine every hour?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. His face was calm, yet his eyes seemed to carry a weight she could not name. "Your Majesty," he said, "my life has found its meaning here. There is no place for me elsewhere." Leora smiled sadly. "You speak as if your life ends with mine." He said nothing, but something in his silence made her heart tremble. She could not tell if she was afraid for him or for herself. All through that night, sleep would not come. She kept thinking about how little she truly knew of the man she trusted most. Where had he learned to fight the way he did? How could someone so gentle move with such deadly skill when battle arose? And why, sometimes, did she see that faint shimmer under his skin when the light caught him just right? Perhaps it was only her imagination, or the tricks of moonlight. She told herself it was nothing. Still, the thought remained. In the days that followed, Leora tried to focus on her duties, but her eyes often searched for Ethan in every hall, every gathering. When he stood near her, all seemed well, yet she could feel an invisible wall between them, a silence he carried not from fear, but from choice. The court continued to gossip. One noblewoman hinted that the queen's protector might one day rise beyond his station. Another mocked that Ethan's silence was just ignorance. Leora's temper flared that day, though she kept her face calm. "His silence," she told them, "has more wisdom than your loudest voices." That night, the moon hung low, red at the edges, and the royal flag shivered in the wind. Far beyond the palace walls, something dark stirred a threat unseen, a storm waiting to fall upon the land. Leora stood at her balcony, the calm air heavy with the promise of change. She felt, for the first time in years, a sense of unease, stronger than any fear of politics. A whisper of instinct told her that soon she would see the truth behind Ethan Maris, the truth that would shake her world and rewrite everything she believed about her loyal guard. For now, she turned back into the Golden Hall. her heavy steps echoing in the still night. Unaware that the man she trusted most carried a secret deep enough to change the fate of the realm itself. The next morning began with a calm sky, but the peace did not last long. A messenger came running through the palace gates, his robe torn and his breath short. He fell to his knees before Queen Leora and cried out that the Dominion army was moving toward the capital. The enemy's king had sent a demand for her surrender. They wanted her crown, her people, and the silver court itself. Leora rose from her throne, her heart steady but heavy. "We will not bow," she said. Her voice held both strength and sorrow. The council began to argue. Some wanted to give tribute, others urged for battle. Ethan stood behind her without speaking, his hands folded behind his back. When the noise grew too loud, Leora raised her palm. The room fell silent. "We will fight," she said again. "Our land belongs to those who defend it." That night, soldiers gathered at the eastern walls. Torches burned in long rows, the flames fluttering in the cold wind. Ethan gave quiet orders to the guards, his calm presence felt even among the fear and tension. Leora went from one soldier to another, speaking simple words of courage. She knew how to lift even the weakest heart. Yet she noticed something unusual as she looked at Ethan's face in the firelight. There was no fear, no strain, only a deep, unspoken knowing. "Ethan," she said quietly, while others were too busy to listen. "How can you be so calm when our city may burn before the sun rises?" He turned toward her, his eyes dark against the orange light. "Because the fire will come whether I fear it or not," he said softly. "Fear will not stop it. But we might." Before she could answer, a horn sounded from the southern gate. It was a sound of warning, harsh and loud. The Dominion forces had arrived sooner than any expected. The ground began to shake under the march of their heavy machines, and the city walls groaned as the first cannonballs struck stone. Leora felt a chill run through her, but Ethan stepped forward with quick precision. "Move the archers to the north tower," he ordered. "Close the western passage. Protect the queen." The battle lit up the night. Fire burst across the rooftops, smoke curling toward the stars. The air smelled of metal and burning wood. Ethan fought at the front line, his sword flashing brighter than the torches. Every time he struck, the enemy's soldiers fell as if the wind itself had turned against them. Those who watched said his movements were faster than sight could follow. Leora stood atop the palace steps with her guards, giving directions and sending healers to the wounded. From there, she could see Ethan moving across the chaos like a shadow within light. Yet something strange began to happen. In the middle of the fight, for a moment she saw a glow around him, soft, nearly invisible, like the shimmer of heat above desert sand. She blinked, thinking it was the fire behind him, but the glow remained. When an explosion tore through the lower market, throwing dust and debris into the air, Ethan moved faster than she thought possible. He stood before her in an instant, lifting his hand. The fire twisting toward her stopped mid-air, swirling but not touching her. The wind carried the sparks away. She stared, speechless. The world seemed to slow down. Even the sound of battle dulled for one strange heartbeat. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What did you do?" He turned briefly toward her, and his eyes looked brighter than the stars. "Later, my queen," he said. "We must win." Then he was gone. Back into the storm, hours passed. The palace wall cracked in places, the courtyard filled with fallen soldiers, yet somehow the enemy could not push through. Every time they came near, Ethan was there, defending, bending the world itself around his blade and his will. The soldiers who fought beside him did not understand what they saw. Some would later say they had felt the ground move, the air spark, and the sky flare like daylight for a moment. By dawn, the Dominion's forces began to retreat, leaving behind their dead and broken machines. The city had survived, though at heavy cost. When the last echoes of war faded, Leora stood in the courtyard, the early light touching her face. All around her were signs of ruin, yet her heart thudded not with fear but with questions. Ethan stood a few steps away, his armor cracked, his eyes distant. His hands bled, but he showed no pain. She walked toward him slowly. "What are you, Ethan Maris?" she asked. He bowed his head. "I am only what I must be," he said quietly. "You wanted your people safe. Now they are, so that is all." But Leora could hear in his voice Something hidden, something more than duty. A truth buried beneath years of silence. As he turned to walk away, the morning sun caught his figure, and again she saw that faint shimmer beneath his skin, like trapped light trying to escape. For the first time since she had become queen, Leora felt truly uncertain. The man she trusted most was still her protector, but now he was also her greatest mystery. The calm she had known was gone, replaced by a single thought that refused to fade. Who was Ethan Maris really? And what secret power had just saved her kingdom? The city was quiet after the battle. Smoke still rose from broken roofs, and the smell of ash lingered in the air. The people began to rebuild their homes, and the healers worked day and night to care for the wounded. Queen Leora walked through the streets in her plain cloak, so the people would not recognize her. She wanted to see the truth of the aftermath with her own eyes, not through the reports of advisors. Children waved at her as she passed, and she smiled gently at them. But inside, her thoughts were full of questions. The image of Ethan stopping the explosion mid-air still lived in her mind. No man should have been able to do such a thing. She had seen fire pause in the air, stone freeze mid-fall, and time itself seemed to hold its breath. That memory haunted her even more than the sound of battle. When the sun set, Leora returned to the palace. Ethan was waiting in the courtyard, his armor cleaned, though scratched and dented. He bowed when she approached, but she could see weariness in the way he stood. "Ethan," she said softly, "walk with me." They moved through the garden paths filled with broken branches and dust from the fight. For a long time neither spoke. Then Leora stopped near the fountain, its water running muddy from fallen leaves. "I saw what you did," she said at last. "You stopped fire as if it were a feather in the wind. That was no trick of light. Tell me the truth. What are you hiding from me?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the ground. "My queen, I have no wish to hide, only to protect." "Protect," she echoed. "What power is it that can freeze flames and bend the air? No earthly soldier fights this way." He looked up then. The night breeze lifted his dark hair, and under the moon his face looked almost peaceful, yet sad. "Long before I came here," he said slowly, "I took an oath. There are few of us now men who live by an ancient promise. We were taught how to call on the energy of the world itself. It is not magic, not what people whisper in stories. It is strength that lies in every living thing, but most have forgotten how to touch it." Leora listened, her heart beating faster. "You mean there are others like you?" "Once," he replied, "but they are gone, or in hiding. To use this gift is to give away your own life, a little at a time. Each time I draw from that force, it takes a piece of me. That is why I guard my strength. It is not endless." Leora's chest tightened. "Then why would you risk yourself for me?" "For this kingdom." He smiled faintly. "Because duty chose me before fear could stop me. And because you believe in peace, that belief keeps this land alive. If it falls, then everything worth guarding ends." The queen turned away, her thoughts spinning. She had ruled for many years with courage, but she had never felt so powerless to understand the world around her. Ethan had been beside her all this time, smiling, watching, protecting, and she had seen only a loyal guard. Now, she saw something far more dangerous and far more precious. "Does anyone else know?" she asked. "No one," Ethan said simply. "I live quietly, so this burden remains unseen. The fewer who know, the safer they are." Leora walked in silence for a moment. "You have given more than any man I have known, but I cannot ask you to keep using this power, not if it steals your life." He gave a quiet laugh, almost gentle. "You never asked. My queen, I chose. I will choose again whenever it is needed." Her heart ached at his words. Strength once hidden behind calm eyes now felt infinite, yet fragile. She wanted to reach for his hand, but stopped herself. Queens did not show their hearts that easily. As they walked back toward the palace, torches flickered along the walls. Leora noticed how their light shimmered faintly across Ethan's skin, as if something lived beneath the surface, something waiting, breathing. She tried to think of him simply as her protector again, but the truth had already changed everything. Later that night, she called her most trusted advisor, Old Master Corin, and spoke quietly. "The battle is won, but a greater secret lives among us. One that could either save this kingdom or destroy it." Corin frowned, but she said no more. She kept Ethan's truth locked in her heart, knowing the danger if others found out. Power like his could tempt even the most righteous men. Outside her chamber, she could hear Ethan's boots on the stone floor as he kept his post. The sound comforted her, yet also reminded her of the risk he carried. Somewhere beyond the horizon, she felt new threats rising. The Dominion might return, or worse. Others might come seeking the power that lived in her guard's blood. Leora laid her hand upon the window stone, watching the moon glow over the hills. She whispered softly to herself, "I thought I knew him." But perhaps no one truly knows the depth of the human spirit until they see what it can endure. And below, Ethan stood in silence, watching the same moon, aware that his secret was no longer his alone. The days after the battle turned into uneasy silence. People tried to rebuild their lives, but fear lingered like smoke that refused to fade. The news of victory spread across the land, yet Queen Leora felt little peace. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the fight was not over. The Dominion would not accept defeat so easily. Ethan stayed near her side, quiet as always. He spoke kindly to the soldiers, helped the builders restore the walls, and gave food to the families who had lost their homes. He seemed calm, almost peaceful, but Leora could see the change in him. His steps had grown slower, and the light she had once seen around him now appeared dim and tired. One evening, the Queen stood at the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky red and gold. Ethan approached, his armor still dusty from patrol. "You should rest, my queen," he said gently. She shook her head. "I cannot rest when danger grows again. I can feel it coming." "You are right," he said quietly. "The Dominion is moving again. My scouts have seen their banners near the eastern ridge. They will come in full strength this time." Leora turned to face him. "Can we defend against them again?" Ethan hesitated a moment before he spoke. "We can try. But if they bring the machines they are building, no wall will be strong enough." His words filled her with dread. She looked into his eyes and saw a shadow of pain there, something heavier than fear. "There is another way," he added after a pause. "But it will cost much." She stepped closer, voice low. "Does it mean using your power again?" He nodded. "Yes, and it will take more from me than before." Leora's heart clenched. "No, Ethan, I forbid it. You saved us once, but I will not lose you for another victory. My life means nothing if the people fall," he said. "I was born for this duty." Her anger flared. "No one is born to die for others forever. You gave enough." Ethan looked at her sadly, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. "You once told me that a ruler's heart must be strong enough to bear the sorrow her people cannot. Let me do the same, my queen. Let your soldier carry this weight." She fell silent, unable to answer. The wind carried the sound of bells from the town below. It was a peaceful sound, yet Leora knew that peace would soon be crushed. Days passed and the army began to prepare. Every man and woman stood ready to defend the city again. The smell of steel filled the air. At night, the queen could not sleep. She would walk to the courtyard where Ethan trained the younger soldiers. His movements looked heavier now, but each strike of his sword still cut through the air like wind through silk. Finally, the war came again. The Dominion's troops marched across the eastern plains, their army larger than before. The sky filled with the smoke of their burning torches. Loud drums shook the ground as their machines rolled forward. Leora stood before her soldiers at the gate, her armor shining under the rising dawn. When Ethan came to her side, she saw that the glow within him had returned, faint but real. "You cannot do this alone," she whispered. He met her gaze. "Then stand with me. We will protect what matters together." The first clash was louder than thunder. Fire and dust covered the battlefield. Arrows filled the sky, and the earth shook as the heavy machines advanced. Ethan walked forward into the storm, his sword blazing as if touched by light. When enemy fire rained toward the queen, he lifted his hand again. The air curved, bending the flames away. The soldiers stared in wonder. Leora rode beside him, her voice shouting orders through the smoke. The sight of their queen and her guard standing side by side gave hope to all who fought. But each time Ethan used his power, his movements grew slower. His skin turned pale, his breath short. Leora could see him faltering and knew he was breaking apart piece by piece. When a giant iron machine tore through the front lines, she thought all was lost. But Ethan stepped forward one last time. The air trembled around him as a bright light exploded from his chest, spreading across the field in a great wave. The machine shattered, its wheels flying into the air. The enemy soldiers fell to their knees, their weapons twisting like melted metal. The force of it knocked Leora backward. When the light faded, Ethan was lying still on the ground. She ran to him, kneeling beside his body. His eyes were closed and his hand lay limp against the dirt. "Ethan," she cried, her voice breaking, "you promised me you would not lose yourself." Slowly, he opened his eyes, a faint smile forming on his lips. "The kingdom is safe, my queen," he whispered weakly. That was the promise I had to keep. Tears filled her eyes as she held him close. Around them, the air was quiet, and the enemy had fled. The soldiers began to cheer, but Leora did not rise. She only looked down at the man who had saved them once again, glowing faintly in her arms like fire fading into soft light. And as dawn broke across the horizon, she understood that his power had never truly been about strength or fire. It was about heart. The same heart that had kept her safe all these years was now the one slipping away in silence. The battlefield lay still under the morning sun. Smoke rose slowly into the pale sky, drifting over the broken ground where men had fought and fallen. The sounds of war had faded, and now there was only the whisper of wind moving through the ruined fields. Queen Leora sat on the ground beside Ethan's still body, the dust and ash staining her royal cloak. She did not care. Her hands were pressed over his heart, hoping to feel one more heartbeat. At first there was nothing. His face had grown pale, his breathing weak. Then, as she watched in silence, a faint light appeared beneath his skin again, like the last glow of a dying candle refusing to fade. "Stay with me," she said softly, her tears falling onto his armor. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and his lips curved in a weak smile. "I told you, my queen," he murmured. "I will not fall while you still need me." "You've already given too much," she said, shaking her head. "You cannot keep fighting the world for me." "I fight for what is right," he answered slowly. "Not for crowns, not for glory, only for you and for the people who cannot raise a sword." Leora could not speak. The soldiers who stood nearby bowed their heads quietly. They saw their great protector upon the ground, and the queen holding his hand, and they felt their hearts ache. It was a moment none would ever forget. By nightfall, the wounded were carried back to the city, and Ethan was taken to the Great Hall, where healers worked endlessly. Leora did not leave his side. She refused to sit on her throne. She stayed beside him as the healers tended his wounds, his skin cold under their hands. His strange light had faded now, and he looked more human than ever, fragile, simple, almost ordinary. For 2 days, he did not wake. Leora walked the halls at night, haunted by fear. She touched the walls that he had defended, looked upon the towers that still stood because of him, and felt her heart grow heavy with guilt. Every stone in the palace seemed to whisper his name. On the third morning, when the light of dawn slipped through the windows, she felt a hand take hers. She turned quickly and saw Ethan's eyes open again. "You should rest, my queen," he said weakly, his voice rough but alive. Leora smiled through her tears. "So should you." "I thought I had lost you forever." He shook his head gently. "Not yet. The world still has work for both of us." She sat by his side, her voice soft. "Changed everything, Ethan. You showed me strength I did not know existed. You made me believe that one heart can hold the power to save an entire world." He looked at her with quiet warmth. "Your belief gave me that strength. Without it, my power is only light without purpose." The door opened, and the soldiers entered to see that Ethan lived. Their cheers filled the hall and echoed through the city. For the first time in many dark months, laughter returned to the kingdom. The light that had faded now grew in the hearts of everyone. Days turned into weeks, and the people began to rebuild again, this time with hope. The fields bloomed, the rivers ran clear, and the air felt different, alive and calm. Ethan returned to duty, though his strength was slower now. Leora sometimes watched him from the garden balcony as he trained younger guards. He smiled more often, and the children of the city followed him like he was a hero from a story. One evening, as the stars came out, Leora called him to join her in the garden. The flowers were in full bloom again, the scent soft and sweet on the night air. They walked side by side in silence until she spoke. "Do you ever wish you could live a life without battles?" she asked softly. Ethan looked up at the stars. A life without battles sounds peaceful, but every heart faces its own war, even in calm times. The world always needs someone to stand when others cannot. She smiled faintly. "Then who will stand for you, Ethan?" He turned to her, his eyes kind. "You already have, my queen. Every time you chose to lead with mercy instead of fear, you stood for me." They stopped walking. The air was still. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Leora reached for his hand and held it gently. "You were never just my protector," she said quietly. "You were the part of me I did not know I needed, the courage that reminded me to believe." He bowed his head slightly, still smiling. "And you reminded me that power means nothing without a heart to guide it." When dawn touched the horizon with soft gold light, they stood together at the edge of the garden, watching the sun climb over the hills. Birds began to sing, their wings glowing in the morning. The world felt new again. The war had ended. The kingdom had risen. The queen and her guard had changed not only their land, but each other. From that day forward, stories of Queen Leora and the man who commanded light were told in every corner of the realm. Yet those who spoke of their story said that the greatest power he ever showed was not when he stopped fire or crushed armies, but when he taught a queen to see that the might of humanity lies not in force, but in love, loyalty, and heart. And whenever the wind moved softly across the silver court, the people would remember the quiet soldier who once bent the world to his will, not for conquest, but for compassion. They would remember that even in silence, even in shadow, true power burns brightest in those who protect without seeking glory. Ethan Maris and Queen Leora became legends, but to each other, they remained what they had always been, two souls, bound by courage. Standing side by side beneath the endless sky,